Bowling can be really, really freaking hard. From the newest bowlers to the most seasoned professionals, there have been points where anyone who has picked up a bowling ball has thought to themselves, man, why can't I figure this out? I've done it, and if you're watching this video because you want to know how to improve on your own, then odds are you have too. So let's go over something that I've found incredibly useful in my time as a bowler that you can actually implement yourself, assuming that you own a smartphone and have something that you can prop that smartphone up with. Let's go over video analysis. We'll talk about some of the reasons why video analysis is useful, how to set up your recording device based upon what you are working on, and what some of the things that I'm looking for in my own game to look at, and perhaps you might be able to look at some of these things too. So why is recording yourself bowling useful? I know it may seem obvious to those of us who have been doing it for a while, but there's a couple reasons. One of the things you'll be able to do is better diagnose poor shots when they happen. Whether you feel something isn't quite right about your approach, or you notice that you have a recurring miss, being able to actually see yourself bowl instead of just trying to feel it can give you new insight into what you're actually doing wrong, so to speak. Another great thing about recording your shots is being able to set up your camera or phone in such a manner that you can specifically look at one part of your game. Let's say you're wanting to focus strictly on your swing path. You're able to position your camera in such a way that you can see what your looks like from directly behind you. This can help identify swing path issues that you may want to work on. In most modern smartphones, the camera also has a slow-mo option. With proper camera work, you can see the details of every single motion of your approach, so that you can see what you're working on in even greater detail. Now, obviously, if you're working on swing path, for example, a side view of your approach isn't really going to help too much. So let's talk about how we want to set up the camera for a few different things that are commonly worked on when you do video analysis. Much like matching up ball selection with lane condition, check out my video on building an arsenal for more info on that, by the way, you'll want to make sure that you match up the camera angle to the part of the game that you're trying to work on. There are three main camera angles that I like to record from depending on what I'm working on. The first camera angle that I use is the one that I use the most, and that is the slightly offset rear view camera shown in this example right here. There are a few things that I use this camera angle in particular for. The first reason is to observe ball motion. This slightly offset camera angle gives me the best view of seeing how the ball is actually rolling down the lane. I look at this a lot when I'm trying to achieve different types of ball roll by adjusting hand positions and creating varying degrees of axis rotation and axis tilt. I will also use this angle, as well as the next angle I will talk about, to work on my release. By utilizing a zoomed in version of this angle, I can actually see specifically where my hand, fingers, and thumb are in relation to where I want them to be in my release. So the next camera angle, and my second most used camera angle, is actually the one that's directly behind me. I use this camera angle for a couple of main reasons. The first one, as I mentioned previously, is to work on my release. By using either this angle or the slightly offset angle, I can view my release in various hand positions and be able to make adjustments to my game from there. The other big way I use this camera angle, and honestly, the primary way that I use it, is for judging my swing plane and swing direction. One of the biggest issues that I personally had when I was younger, all the way up until about 2020, was I had a big loop in my swing. This caused consistency issues as well as trajectory issues. By using this camera angle, I can see how in line my swing is from start to finish. Another thing that this angle can be used for, in addition to the final angle that we're going to go over, is timing. Speaking of timing, that's really the only reason that I use this third angle. The side view angle allows me to see my form from start to finish from the side. This will let me see where the ball is in relation to my feet, and from there I can determine whether my timing is where I want it to be or not. On a personal level, I will also say that this is an angle that I don't get to utilize as much as I would like to, simply because you often need extra space, as well as either a tall tripod or a camera operator to utilize it effectively. If you have the means to do it, I do highly recommend using this camera angle if you are working on timing. I'll show you how I take a look at my timing videos in further detail in just a minute. And speaking of looking at videos in further detail, now that we've gone over some of these reasons for utilizing video analysis and some of the camera angles that you can use when doing video analysis, let's actually do some examples of what I'm looking for when I do video analysis of my own game. Alright, so let's go into some analyzation here. So this is that first camera angle I mentioned. This is the offset from behind. And so we're going to go over a little bit about what I'm looking for in particular when I am reviewing this camera angle. So this is actually from a video that's on my YouTube channel from a long time ago, about a year and a half ago at least, called Working on Touch. This was one of the last videos that I recorded before I had my knee surgery in October. And I will preface this by saying this during this analyzing session, I'm not doing this scripted like I did most of the rest of the video, so bear with me if I slip up at all. So the first thing we'll do, let's go ahead and play the full clip, just so that you guys can get an idea of what we're looking at with this shot from start to finish. So here you go. All right, now, before we show Brad and Kyle here, let's go back to that other video here. All right, so here is what we're looking at, what I'm trying to analyze here. The first thing I'm going to be looking at is I'm going to be looking at what the ball motion actually is. So if we come to here, we're going to fast forward. All right. So say I'm working on getting a specific ball motion and I'm trying to make the ball get a little bit further down the lane. I'm trying to increase my axis tilt, increase my axis rotation, get a sharper shape off the back of the pattern. I'm going to very closely, you'll be able to see it here, watch where my ball ends up going off the back end of the pattern. So let's go ahead. We're going to utilize YouTube's built-in tools, the playback speed here, which is another good reason. If you don't have a slow-mo camera, I highly, highly recommend uploading your video to YouTube because it has the 25% playback speed. Now, you'll want to mute the video because you don't want to mess your ears up because it will sound horrendous when you slow it down. But we'll be able to see that this is at 25% speed, and if you record at 60 FPS, it's not too bad. And so I can see here that this is actually pretty darn close to ideal ball motion for what I'm bowling on that day. You'll see that it doesn't quite get back to the pocket the way that you'll want it to. That's why I ended up throwing a messenger off the sidewall here. That means that instead of hitting the 17.5 board that I'm aiming for, you'll see that it hits the head pin. Oh, that's about 15.5. So that's about a 2-board right miss. All right. So off that shot, I'm going to adjust my hand position accordingly. I'm going to change, what I need to in order to get to the pocket properly, and then go on to my next shot. So another thing that I'm looking at here, and again, the slow motion helps a lot. If I am trying to adjust my ball roll, okay, and I am looking at the motion that this particular shot is giving me, I can see that at this point, as I'm getting very close to the release point, that my hand is really coming around the side of the ball here. And with that being the case, it's going to extend the length down the lane that the ball goes before it starts to read the friction. And it's also going to create a little bit more violent motion off the back end. So you'll be able to see that play out here. It gets through the fronts really nice and clean. And then right there, it starts to make that motion back. Now, this shot is a good example of me not playing in quite the right part. I probably need to be have a little bit more closed angle here on this particular pattern, because it doesn't quite make it back. So I know that may sound a little contradictory to what I said at the very beginning here, but looking at it a second time in slow motion, I can see that this ball actually ended up scooting a little bit too far, blowing through the break point just a little bit, but still having enough to be able to recover to mix them up a little bit. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that I'm looking for in particular with this camera angle. I can also see a couple other things here too. Like, for example, I can see where my balance arm, you see how my balance arm is coming out behind me here. I can see where that is in relation to everything. I can also see exactly where my foot is pointed. You'll be able to see that with the rear view look as well, the directly behind look that we're going to go over here in just a second. And there's a few other little things that you can pick up on as well. You can see my follow through, you can see my trail leg. All of these things are really easy to see from this slightly offset camera angle. And so using this in conjunction, especially with the second camera angle, is where you're going to be able to get the most use out of this. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. If I'm looking at working on this, for example, I was working on keeping my hands soft that day. All right? I was trying to keep my hands soft, and I was trying to really let the ball just come off my hand. And so compared to what I was doing before this shot, you can see I don't really gnaw on it the way that I had been leading up to this point. And you'll be able to see it a lot better in full speed here. So, boom, just smooth, quick, not really, yanking up on it, because that was the issue I was having before. But nice, smooth, gets off my hand real quick, and because I was able to come off my hand real quick and smooth, that's going to increase my rev rate, even though I'm not trying to. So, another perk of trying to keep that hand as quiet as possible. But yeah, that gives you a good insight in some of the things that I'm looking for with this camera angle in particular. So now that we've talked a little bit about this, let's go ahead and take a look at the next clip, which is going to be from directly behind. Alright, so now that we've taken a look at that slightly offset camera angle, let's take a look at this one. So I know it may not look like it's going to be directly behind, but it's about as directly behind as I'm going to be able to get at this particular bowling center. This is actually from January of 2022. I shot a 300 game while I was practicing with some friends, and these are the last few shots. So as you can see, this directly behind camera angle, I'm going to be able to specifically see where my arm swing is in relation to the rest of my body, essentially. So with this, I'm going to be able to see how my trajectory is coming off out of my arm swing. I'm going to be able to see where my push away goes. I'm going to be able to see if I have any sort of loop or kink in it. Like I mentioned earlier, I used to have a really bad loop in my swing. That's kind of gone away a little bit, so that's a good thing. But here, I'll go ahead and play the first shot here, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about here. Okay, so that's the first shot. Now, let's go ahead. We're going to mute this. We're going to slow it down just like we did with the first clip. And the big thing I'm looking for this camera angle for myself is I'm looking to see that arm swing path. All right, so let's go ahead. All right, so we come back right here. Here's our push away. And the first thing I notice is my hand is on the inside of the ball. That's good. However, I am pushing off a little bit to the right, and you'll see the effect that has here in just a second. Comes back, and there it is. This is what happens when you end up coming back. I'm sorry, when your push away goes off to the right a little bit. So when you push off to the right, the ball is going to end up going left in your backswing. And what that does is it can do one of two things. It can be a good or a bad thing, depending on what you're looking for. But it can really open up your arms, your shoulders, so that you can really project the ball out to the right. Or one of the things that it can cause you to do is it can cause you to tug it, trying to overcorrect for it. So it really depends on how big that shifting of your shoulders is when you have that outwards to the right push away, whether or not it's going to be truly detrimental. Almost anybody, any coach these days is going to tell you that you want to avoid the right outward push away as much as possible. What I did there, that's not horrible, but it's still something that I want to work on. Again, I've worked on that in particular a lot over the past year. Even with my surgery, I did several hundred push away drills while I was recovering. You can ask just about anybody who knows me that I was doing that. So, it's a very common thing with amateurs, including myself, to have that push away off to the right. It's just a natural tendency. And so if you are able to overcome that and focus on getting that push away out to the left a little bit more, exaggerate it even, you'll be able to help straighten out your arm pass a little bit better than what it might have been before, if that's an issue that you struggle with. Um, on this particular shot, let me take a look at this again. Yeah, so I mean, overall, even though it was a little bit further off out to the right than I would have liked, it was still pretty straight. And then up here, you can see I actually get up to the top of my swing here, and then right here, I dip down and get back into the proper swing slot. And so by here, this is where I want my position to be in general when I'm releasing a shot here. Now, it's a little bit more tilt than I would like to be, a little bit more on the side instead of elbow in as I would like to see. But I get away with it on this one. You'll see here. So, but that gives you an idea of what I'm really looking for when I am taking a look at this directly behind angle. I can see where my hand position is. I can see where my arm swing is. And using this in conjunction with the last angle that we're going to go over is going to be able to help you identify those specific things. Like, if I'm looking at this, the big thing that I would be focusing on my next shot would be making sure that I almost over exaggerate that push away to the left and see what that looks like on film. Now, you don't have to do what I do. You don't have to upload and look at it later like we're doing now. On the spot analyzation is a huge, huge tool that you can do while you're practicing, especially if you don't have any sort of time limit. That's a huge, huge tool that you can use. Record yourself doing a shot, take a look at it, say, hey, my arm swing isn't quite where I want it to be. My swing path isn't quite what I want it to be. Let me do this, make the adjustment, see what happens, record the next shot so that you can see how it looks and say, hey, that actually looks pretty good, or no, I still need to tweak it some. So that's really something that I highly, highly recommend you do. Take the video, look at the video, make the adjustment, record a new video, take a look at that new video, and continue to adjust as necessary. So now that we've talked a little bit more about that, I've rambled on even more. Let's take a look at the final one, that side angle. All right, so here we are. We are now looking at the side angle. And this is one that I really wish I could use more often, but as I mentioned earlier, and you can see here why, it's something that is space prohibitive. So if you bowl at a very a very bowling center, a very busy bowling center, you're going to have some hard times finding the space for it. And as you can see, you got to be on the approach, so you're going to need either a tall tripod or you're going to need somebody to film for you. So let's go over why this particular angle is so good and why it's something that I really recommend you using if you have the means to. So let me go ahead and play this. This is a 6-second clip. We'll play this first. Okay, so this clip is extraordinarily useful for timing things. If you are trying to have your timing be at a certain point, for example, if you want to make sure that your ball is starting to move at a certain point in your approach, then this is a great angle to figure that out with. So let's take a look. I actually don't have this one uploaded because it's one of those, again, that I just never had the time to do it, so I couldn't upload it. So let me go ahead and we're going to go over to the other version of this that I have, which is in slow motion. And we're going to take a look and see a couple things that I've noticed with this particular video in the past. Again, this is a very old video. This is actually, I believe, from 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So this is over 2 years ago, well before I had my knee surgery. So let's take a look here and see a few things that I'm looking for. The big thing that I have an issue with is late timing. And when my timing is late, you'll see that my right foot will start moving and hit the ground before my ball even begins to move. So let's see if that happens in this particular video. So here we go. The right foot's up. Ball hasn't moved. Ball hasn't moved. Ball hasn't moved. The ball needs to be moving. Instead of where it is right now, it needs to be moving right about here. So you can see, this is not very much time. This whole clip, remember, is 6 seconds in the other video. And that's with a little bit of time at the beginning and the end. So this split-second difference is going to mess my timing up to the point where it's not exactly the way that I need it to be. So let's take a look further. Let me go to the next step here. So by my second step, my ball should be parallel. Now that's good. That's actually exactly where I want it to be. However, because I'm still late getting into that timing, getting into this motion, into this position, I'm going to have to essentially work to get back to this position and to get to this point where I want to be. And again, we don't want that. We want this to be as, I know it's a misnomer, but we want it to be as free and as loose as possible. And you can't have that if you have a late timing to start. So let's go ahead. Here's the second step. Now, third step, I should be at the top of my backswing right here, and I'm not quite there yet. And this is what I mean. You're going to see this here. Here's my backswing. It goes up, and there we are. All right? So there we are at the top of the backswing, and I would like to hit the top of the backswing right about here. See? All right? So it's not, again, it's very, very close. It's not like this is awful by any means, but it's not quite where I would personally want to see me going into the slide and having my backswing. So let's go ahead and take a look here. We're gonna see the finish here. All right, and there I finish my slide. That's perfect. All right, so I end up at a couple points. You'll probably have noticed that it's basically every other step I have late timing, which I had never really noticed until now. And so with every other step being a little bit late, or in certain cases, perfectly on time, that's going to be a recipe for inconsistencies. And so we need to figure out how we can eliminate that late timing from my first and third steps, my odd number steps. Until then, I'm going to have consistency issues because of my timing alone. So Again, that's really the number one thing that I like to use this angle for. There's a couple other things that you can use this for as well. If you are working on balance at the line, like you can see here how I finish here, I would say that I'm in a very balanced position at this point. You see, I've got my knee bend, my knee is over my toes, so good knee bend. My trail leg is it's slightly off the ground, which is okay. You see a lot of guys do that. I try to keep mine as low as possible because I had a tendency when I was younger again to fly up on the backside. So I try to keep it as low as possible now. Not to mention with having had that surgery, which I know I mentioned like 5 times in the past 2 minutes. Um, Having had that surgery, having that leg lower to the ground makes it feel like I have that extra stability. So I can brace myself if I ever feel like I need. Now, let's see here. Yep, that's good. That trail leg doesn't go too far forward. That's good. That's good. Now, some people, depending on who you are and what your flexibility is like, sorry about that, uh, will want to have this foot actually pointing forward. Now, I'm a big dude. I'm not the most flexible person in the world, and so I'm perfectly happy with where my foot is here. So, again, stable at the line. My balance arm, you can see, is perfectly lined up with my shoulders. You know, it's completely perpendicular to the rest of my body. My head is stable the entire way through. No jerking motion or anything like that, so that's good. Now, one of the things you can also use is you can see my starting position here. Now, this is more of a tip than video analysis kind of thing, but you want to start off in a sort of athletic position, and as you get closer to the line, you see how I start going in this kind of direction. I hope you can see my cursor. But my head will actually go down just slightly, even though it's very stable. I'll start getting lower and lower into the line, and as I get into my slide, that is the lowest point that I am here. So you want to start off in an athletic position with your knees slightly bent, but as you go into your approach, you will actually end up going from a more upright position into a more low position to get more leverage. And so if that's something that you notice when you record yourself from this angle, that you're not getting that low finish position, well, not super low, but you understand what I mean. You know, a lower position than you're starting at. If you're not getting that, then you may need to work on a couple things to get better leverage at the foul line. So I hope that that does a pretty good job of understanding why video analysis is so unbelievably useful. Some of the different camera angles that you can play around with in order to get an idea of what you need to work on with your game. And I hope that you got a little bit of an idea of what it's like to actually do one of these video analysis things on the fly. Like I said, all 3 of these videos that we just looked at, I did kind of impromptu, which I don't normally do. If you have seen the first part of this video or the other video in the series, Bowling 101, you'll be able to tell right away that that was scripted and this is not. And so, you'll be able to get a true, fresh, raw reaction from what I'm seeing with my own game here and some of the things that you can look for in your own game to try to help improve yours a little bit. And one of the things that I want to emphasize before I let you guys go here is I really want to emphasize that the most valuable thing that you can do for your bowling game is see a coach. Video analyzation on your own time is good every now and then for sure, but work on these kind of things with a coach as well. If you and your coach can do this video analyzation together, that's even better. Having your coach be able to point things out to you is invaluable, and if you find a good coach in your area, more than likely he or she is going to use these kind of video analysis sessions to help further your game. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. This video and all my other videos in this series, the Bowling 101 series, take a long time for me to work together, edit, create, brainstorm. So please, if you learned anything, if you enjoyed it, please like, please subscribe, and if you could, hit the notification bell. That'll let you know whether or not I have posted something recently. Also, I am on Twitter at Suitor Bowling, and if you have any questions, feel free to just reach out to me. I'm more than willing to help anybody that I can. That's part of why I'm doing this whole segment on Bowling 101 to begin with. I've got a little bit of knowledge, not a ton, but I'd like to share it with you. So thank you very much again for watching, and we will see you in the next video.